Hello, everyone, and welcome to For Head's Sake, the weekly webcast and podcast of the National Headache Foundation. I'm Dr. Lindsay Weitzel, founder of Migraine Nation and chronic daily migraine survivor since the age of 4. I am excited and honored today because I'm here with Dr. Dawn Buse. Dr. Buse is a clinical professor of neurology and a psychologist who specializes in headache. Hi, Dr. Buse. How are you doing today?
Hi, Dr. Weitzel. I'm happy to be here today. It's a somber but important topic. So
It is.
always happy
Right.
to be here with you and always happy to be with our listeners.
Right. So we did call this as sort of a special recording. And it could be one of the most important episodes we've recorded. And I'm so grateful to Dr. Buse for being ready and able to record with us sort of on short notice. And we've asked Dr. Buse to lend her expertise to us today and talk to us about how best we can take care of and watch out for both ourselves and our friends in our headache community. And I think this is a topic that we hesitate to discuss often, and we're going to go ahead and discuss it so that we can take care of each other. The fact is that cluster headache has been determined to be the worst pain known to man, is referred to as suicide headache. Our audience is also likely aware that the suffering of migraine, particularly chronic migraine, also puts us at greater risk. I even started my social media group, Migraine Nation, because a friend of mine with chronic migraine lost her life to suicide years ago. So we are going to go ahead and address this. So Dr. Buse, for people who are listening, who might not be familiar with you, will you go ahead and just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and why you work so hard for the migraine and headache community?
Well, thank you, Lindsay. So to share a little bit about myself, I'm Dawn Buse. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and a clinical professor of neurology at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. I've spent my entire career working in the migraine and other severe headache, including cluster field, and work with people with headache diseases, chronic pain diseases, and other chronic conditions to live their life as well as they can as a clinical psychologist, as well as doing a lot of epidemiologic research, kind of understanding what life is like with these diseases and how we can make life the best that it can be with these diseases.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. You and I have discussed a few things on this podcast previously that I think are relevant to this topic, including stress, depression, stigma, etc., other things too, but we're going to hit on a few of these. But let's start with the science. What do we know about suicide, migraine, cluster, and other headache diseases?
Let's start with biology.
Okay.
So migraine, cluster, other severe headache diseases share some pathways with some of the psychiatric conditions such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, as well as experiences like adverse childhood experiences, bullying, trauma. They're going to share some activity, especially in the serotonergic pathway. Serotonin is involved in all of these conditions, as well as some genetic predispositions, which means we might see things run in families, or there might be some things in your genes that make you more or less likely to react in certain ways. So there's a biology, there's a real biology component underlying these relationships.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we know that there's just we have talked before, just like people with migraine are a bit more likely to be depressed than someone without migraine. So we know that our brains might head towards certain directions. How about
And I
the
like the way you said that. Those are
Mhm.
comorbidities, more
Right?
likely to occur together than at chance. We've got a whole bunch of them with migraine and cluster headache as well. And people with migraine are 3 to 5 times more likely to have depression than someone without migraine. Cluster, the rates can be even a bit higher. Now, it doesn't mean that someone is weak or not handling their disease well. This is not a character flaw. It
Mm-hmm.
means that there's some things in the genes and some things happening in the neurotransmitters like serotonin
Mm-hmm.
that lead to both of these conditions and more conditions. There's a whole constellation actually of conditions that are related to serotonergic activity that kind of co-occur. So I think it's
Okay.
really important that we get that on the table, that these are co-occurring for reasons up here in our brain and our nervous system, and not a weakness of character. That's really important.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the society and social factors that you mentioned.
Well, this becomes really, really important. So let's talk about suicide. It's hard, but it's one reason why we're here today. And so what do we know about suicide? Well, one of the very biggest risk factors for suicide is lack of social ties and connection.
Hmm.
So what connections do you have? Now, it doesn't have to be traditional. It may be your family, it may be your coworkers, it may be your online support groups. And
Hmm.
the migraine cluster and other severe headache communities are amazing. There's a lot of virtual support that we give and receive to each other, a lot of education, a lot of community, a lot of fellowship that we share together. That matters. That matters a lot. Do you have
Hmm.
connections with furry loved ones? Do you love your cat, your dog? Literally, all of
Hmm.
those connections keep us moving and alive day to day with purpose and intention. Having those connections are very important. On the opposite side, do you feel stigmatized in your family or at your
Right.
workplace if you're working, or in your school, or in your church community, in your hobbies, whatever it is? Do you feel connected or do you feel isolated? That isolation is a very big risk factor, but it's one that we can work on. So that's an
Right.
important thing to think about.
Right. And we also have an entire episode. If you'd like to go back and watch, Dr. Abuse and I recorded episode 90 that had to do with how to get through when your family and friends don't understand your headache disorder. And that can be very helpful too if people feel like that they want to hear about that. So let's move on to your personal style, your personal history, your personality. How does that contribute?
Well, a lot of our risk factors for suicidality and some of the other kind of responses to life with a chronic illness come from who you are personally.
Hmm.
What experiences did you have? Were you abused as a child? Have
Hmm.
you lived through major trauma? Do you have PTSD? If you
Hmm.
had early traumatic experiences, your brain is so brilliant, it rewires itself for survival and creates
Hmm.
a very heightened survival response. You may have more anxiety, you may have startle responses, you may have challenges trusting others. Now,
Hmm.
those aren't drawbacks. Your brain helped you survive a horrible or multiple horrible experiences. And now that's going to change and shape the way you respond to everything. So, do you have a trauma history? Um,
Hmm.
what other comorbidities might you have? Do you experience depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder? As I mentioned, PTSD. And then as well, how do you generally look at the world? Do you have a style where you see the good in the world and you are a little bit more glasses half full?
Hmm.
Or do you tend to feel, or are you now feeling hopeless about the
Hmm.
future, things getting better? Do you feel helpless, that there's nothing you can do? You don't have that confidence, that self-efficacy that you can help make things better? Do you have feelings of guilt or shame? These are kind of these self-stigma questions. Do you see yourself as less than, less worthy? These are all risk factors.
Hmm.
But the good news is these are all remediable. These are all things that either through your own sorts of work, making connections, getting educated about wellness, or actually talking with a therapist, a psychologist, maybe even an
Right.
app, doing some cognitive behavioral therapy, we start to shift the way that we look at things, and those become protective factors.
Right. I always like to say, if you are feeling this way, surround yourself with books, whether they're about cognitive behavioral therapy or movies that make you feel strong and happy. You've heard me say before, if you're building a rock wall against migraine and all those rocks are strategies, the mortar is your mentality that's holding it all together. So surround yourself with the things that make you feel warm and fuzzy, whether they're movies or books or whatever, for those moments when the pain is bringing you down. So yes, these things that you talk about are things that we can really, really try and surround ourselves with things to improve
Yes.
those moments.
I
Um,
actually like someone to create a 911 emergency survival kit for the
mhm,
darker moments.
mhm,
Often the darker times, that someone may think about suicide or may feel very alone, or someone may engage in self-harm types of behaviors like
mhm,
cutting your own skin or burning your own skin. And Lindsay, we should probably talk about that in a different podcast sometime, but
mhm,
those are also coping mechanisms. You might say, oh, that sounds strange. It's a
mhm.
coping mechanism for kind of grounding and centering back in your body
Right.
and kind of getting through a very dark time. Well, I like people to create this emergency survival kit for those darkest times. Often those times literally are dark. They're the middle of the night when you can't call anyone,
Mhm,
you really feel alone. What would you want in that? Would you want, these may sound silly, your favorite candle? Well, maybe not candles, because some people, the scent is a little too much. Would you want a lovely eye mask? Would you want
mhm,
to watch certain videos? Do you
mhm.
need to look at a live stream puppy cam, um,
That's true.
one of my patients like to look at videos of supermodels falling off the catwalk.
Uh-huh.
If there's something particularly funny,
Right.
have that together, like a best friend was taking care of you. What would they pull
Mhm,
together? Your favorite chocolate chip cookie dough, your favorite ice cream in the back of the freezer. What would be soothing at these darker times to help get you through them? You can even write yourself a note or a letter or reminder, or have someone else write you a letter that you put in this survival kit that you read during these dark times as a reminder that the light will come again, the sun will rise again.
exactly. Yes.
And Lindsay, I'm so excited that as of last year, we now have a 3-digit number,
Mhm.
988, which is a
Okay.
suicide and crisis hotline that anyone can call or text at any time to talk to a live trained counselor who can
Mhm,
help through a crisis. This is something that someone who's going through a crisis themselves can call or text. Or
mhm.
if you know someone in crisis and you need to get advice on how to help, you can call or text. So
Right.
988, we all want to learn that number.
So let's not forget that we are currently recording around the time of the holidays. I think this is important because this does affect our mood, our expectations, etc. Can you please address that for us, really quick, Dr. Buse?
Absolutely, Lindsay. So this is a hard time of year for many, many people, regardless of if they have migraine, cluster, any other type of illness. In fact, the epidemiology is that suicides do rise around this time of year
Mhm,
for everybody. And I think there's several things that go on. I think that the holidays are portrayed to be this idyllic time of
mhm,
happiness and connection and family. But in reality, very few people actually have that idyllic of an experience.
right.
There are all sorts of emotions and feelings that can come up around family, family of origin, feelings about loneliness, feelings that it's not what it looks like in a movie or on social media. And it's very easy to look at social media and compare your experience to other people on social media. Although we need to remember that those are all curated examples, and that often people want to present their best, most beautiful, most happy, most festive self, but that really there's a lot of crisis and strife that can go on for everybody with the pressure of the holidays.
Mhm,
This is a time when a lot of times we spend time with our family of origin, which can be a great thing, but can also be filled with all sorts of challenges with history and relationships. And then a
mhm,
time when a lot of people may be disconnected and feeling especially lonely. They may not
right.
have those connections. They may not be able to travel. There also might be financial challenges. And then when you live with migraine and other headache disease and you try to keep a healthy kind of regular lifestyle, this is a time also when people are traveling, they're eating and drinking different things, they're not sleeping at the same time, they're probably
Right.
not eating as healthy, they're not managing their stress. So it's also a time that is rife for increasing attack frequency. So this is a hard time, even though the media tells us it should be an idyllic, wonderful time. So if you're having
Mhm,
any of these feelings or challenges during the holidays, know that not only are you not alone, you are really normal and in the largest group of people as they come to
mhm,
holidays with stress and challenges. So this is a time to
right.
take special care of yourself and be especially gentle with yourself.
Right. And you are never alone. Don't forget to go to our social media groups that we have for people with the various headache disorders. There's ones for cluster, ones for migraine, and lean on our community in this time in case you are not able to lean on the family members, et cetera, that you are around, because many of us are in that situation. So don't feel like you're the only one. And I always feel like it's okay to use your sense of humor to get through it, even if you are in pain. I always feel like the holidays are more like a Chevy Chase movie than a Lifetime movie.
Yeah,
And that's
yes,
my personal
so true.
expectation of what it's going to be like. And I find it that it's much easier to deal with things that happen that are outside our control if you look at it that way. So
I
that's
love
how
that you
I
said
handle it.
lean on our community.
Mm-hmm.
This is a community. Lindsay and
Mm-hmm.
I and everyone that you talk to in our social media communities, our major organizations, the National Headache Foundation, American Migraine Foundation, CHAMP, um, all of these groups are here because we care about people living with severe headache diseases. And when we come together
Mm-hmm.
through other patients and other experiences, the result can be just wonderful. There are
Right.
a lot of ways to connect in our community. There are Facebook pages, there are other types of social media, there's some other kinds of groups, there's these podcasts which can be really helpful. There's a lot of ways to connect, even if you're not physically in the same space. But remember, this group is here for you. You're not alone, and we care about you, we care about each other. And that's why these losses have hit us all so hard. And I could see that this past 2 weeks in all of the conversations and posts that I was seeing on
Yeah.
social media. Even if people did not directly know the people who've passed,
Mm-hmm.
everyone's feeling grief and sadness and shock. And it really shocks kind of our whole community. It shakes everyone's sense of of well-being. So
Mm-hmm.
seeing one person in our community affects all of us. And that's why watching out for each other and knowing the warning signs and also knowing the protective actions is so important.
Okay. And Dr. Buse, I think something we wanted to address really quick. I think people automatically assume that anyone who loses their life to suicide or who has suicide attempts is depressed, even when they have a severe pain disorder, um, is sometimes suicidal behavior. Is it sometimes independent of depression, especially in the context of severe pain?
Yes, yes. Depression is not the whole answer, and it's not even
Mm-hmm.
always the reason.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what the risk factors are for people
Mm-hmm.
who commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's something you're feeling or whether you're listening to someone else talk, here are some
Mm-hmm.
keys to look for.
Mm-hmm.
Being isolated, not connected,
Right.
is a risk factor. Feeling like now some people are introverts and happy to have their alone time. So
Right.
that's not the same thing. If you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling rejuvenated and enjoying some of that alone time, that's a different thing. But
Right.
feeling isolated, lonely,
Mm-hmm.
disconnected is a challenge, is a risk factor. Feeling like a burden, feeling like others would be better off if you weren't here. That is a
Right.
big red flag, whether you hear yourself saying it in your own mind or you hear someone else saying it, that's a big red flag.
Okay.
Feeling an increase in anxiety. Now, this
Okay.
sounds surprising. You would think someone in the depth of depression is the most likely to commit suicide. Well, it's actually takes some energy and planning to commit suicide.
Mm.
So actually, when someone's feeling a little bit more anxious, maybe someone might have bipolar disorder and kind of be moving towards mania and getting a little bit more
Mm.
energy. That's actually
Okay.
a higher risk time than really the depths of a depression.
Okay.
Um, Increased substance use is often associated
Okay.
with suicidality. And there's also a trait of impulsivity. So, kind of making a rash decision, doing it quickly.
Okay. Okay.
And when you hear stories of suicide attempt survivors, they will often say, as soon as I did X, I thought, why did I do that? Because often if you can get past that darkest, deepest moment and move forward in any way, whether it's self-soothing, whether it's distracting, whether someone just happened to call at that moment, you can often get past that moment of impulsivity. You can get back to feeling a little bit more balanced again.
Okay.
It's during those darkest moments combined with the impulsivity that we actually see successful suicide attempts.
Okay. And that's why we shouldn't be afraid to call this hotline number, this 988 number.
Call 988, whether it's for
mhm.
you or whether it's to talk through you're concerned about a friend, a family member, someone in our community, and you want advice about what you should do. You can call
Okay.
988 or text them in either case. So, Lindsay, I think that's a great point. It is not all depression. It's not only depression. There's other things going on. PTSD, a life of trauma, a life of
Okay.
bullying, a life of child abuse and maltreatment are all risk factors.
Okay.
But again, I want to remember, what are those protective factors? Connection, purpose in life, looking at the things that are more positive. Not to say that we have to be Pollyanna, but
Right.
anything that gives you hope and purpose and connection.
Okay.
If you have family members you're caring for, that's a reason. If you have a job or a hobby or an academic pursuit that you care about, if you're committed to your migraine or your cluster community, that's a purpose. If you have to be here tomorrow morning to feed your cat because you love her or him, that's a purpose.
Right.
Whatever your connection and purpose is, keeps you tied here on this planet and keeps you going day to day. We're
Okay.
going to really be concerned when someone loses their sense of purpose and loses
Right.
those connections.
So before we go, we did touch on this, but I want to make sure we know, because most people don't know what to do if someone in our community reaches out to them. I can't say that I particularly knew what to do before we started discussing the 988 number. Other than calling 988 and asking for advice, what should we say in that moment when someone says to us that they are having these thoughts?
Well, talk about it directly using the actual language. Don't shy away from it. Don't use metaphors. Say, are you having thoughts of hurting yourself or ending your life?
Okay.
They might even share how they're going to do it.
Okay.
Have they planned it? They have a plan, and do they have the means? Whatever plan they're considering, if they have those means necessary, be it they have access to a gun, they have access to a large amount of pills, we're going to be even more worried. What we're going to do is say to them, I am worried about you. I am here for you. I'm going to stay with you right now, be it phone, text, direct message, or in person. And we're not going to ignore any of these signs. We're going to take them quite seriously. We might even be a little annoying in the intent of helping. And we're just going to talk about it straight out. Say, I'm seeing these risk factors. I'm concerned. And what you can do right then is you could call or text 988 and say, let's get someone else who's an expert who can talk us through this involved. If the person does not want to do that and they're willing, you can always go to an emergency department. An emergency department is open 24/7, 365, and someone can always walk into the emergency department. Now, it's not the best experience, and people with serious headache diseases have spent time in emergency departments and know it might be a long time and it's bright and loud, but emergency departments are always there 24/7. And so that's always an option if someone doesn't think that they are safe. So you're going to use direct language. You're going to check in. Do you actually think you're going to hurt yourself or end your life? Do you have a plan to do that? And you're going to just find out how far along they've gone in that plan, and you're going to get help while you've still got them there, be it texting or emergency department. Okay.
All right, Dr. Buse, thank you so much. This is very helpful. Not the cheeriest subject that we've covered, but I think it is so important. I want everyone out there to have this information and these skills so that they recognize. I think it's important to recognize this in yourself and recognize it in our community. And before we go, what else would you like to say to everyone?
I'd like to speak directly to our listeners and say, Lindsay and I and the people behind this podcast and all the people listening care about you. You're a member of our community and you're important to us.
Mhm.
We don't want to lose any members of our community.
No.
And so I want us to really make a vow to each other that we're going to stay connected with each other, check
Mhm.
in on each other, look for those warning signs, and be sure to do things we can to enhance the protective factors.
Yes, it's okay to focus on the positive. You don't have to feel like you're being a Pollyanna. That's one of the things that I think that I learned through my headache and migraine journey, is it is okay to really build those positive, warm, fuzzy feelings in your mind.
Yeah. And you know yourself best. So if you're feeling like your thoughts and feelings are getting into dangerous territory, please seek help. You can go to,
Mhm.
you can call 988, you can go to the emergency department,
Yes.
or if it's not that far along, talk to your primary care professional about seeking treatment. It can be medication treatment, it can be cognitive behavioral therapy, it could be mindfulness. Get started on some of those treatments early. Cognitive
Mhm.
behavioral therapy can help a lot with the feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, and really start to change how you see things. So please keep good care of yourself, be gentle with yourself, kind of keep checking in with yourself about how you're doing. Know that the holidays can be hard for anyone, but any time of year, any day of the year, living with chronic illnesses is not easy.
Right.
So keep doing your best. Let's check in on each other and let's all be gentle and kind to each other.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Buse. Thank you everyone for listening in today. And we wish everyone just a happy and healthy holiday season, because that is what it is when we are recording. And please join us again next week for the weekly webcast and podcast of the National Headache Foundation. Bye-bye.